We're back with another exciting episode. This is a episode that is a little bit of a bittersweet episode because I want to shout out my ex co-host Jamie, who helped launch the podcast with us. And I miss you, Jamie, if you're listening. And we're gonna try to deliver the same impact Jamie has done in the last dozen or so podcasts. And for those of you that have already heard my voice, this is Satish, founder and CEO at Schoolio. And the podcast is all about bringing to light topics that we as educators, and let's talk about what that word means shortly. We as home educators, what we know, what we don't. And the pandemic has shown us that we have a lot of questions that we don't even know we should be asking. And so that's what this podcast is about. We deep dive into issues around life and kids and education and parenting, and find a common pattern that unites all of us parents who choose to educate at home with some support. So that's what today's about. If you're liking it, hit the like button, subscribe button, comment below, get involved in the conversation. And I've got a co-host, the amazing Marie. Hello, Marie. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, everyone. Hi. Thanks for having me.
Marie, as some of you know, is our customer service manager, the deliverer of happiness. And most of the customers that have bought our product at some point, I've talked to Marie either before purchasing, during, or after support. And so I'm so excited, Marie, that you're able to join me for this podcast.
Yes, thank you, Satish.
And the hero, the star for today is our special guest, Alycia, and she's checking in from Ottawa. And one of the big reasons we want to chat with Alycia is a background in working with kids with special needs, especially in education. And she's also been impacted by COVID and made some really amazing choices to continue helping out parents and kids. And so we want to dive into today's topic around, how do we as home educating parents work with our kids who might have some sort of a learning disability? What does that word even mean? It's a scary word. Let's demystify it. Let's make it, functional and useful. And so welcome, Alycia, to the Schoolio podcast.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
Amazing. So let's start with like life 101. How are you holding up? Where are you in the world? Give us a little intro into what's going on with you.
Yeah, well, you caught me at a good time because in Ottawa, like the rest of the province, we're also in lockdown. So I've got a whole lot of free time on my hands right now. And so I have an advanced diploma in child and youth work. And so the main focus of that program is learning how to work with kids in education with special needs, as well as mental health.
Okay.
And so I have had the pleasure of doing co-ops and working on hands with kids. I have been working with kids for over a decade now. And I can't imagine a job where I'm only speaking to adults. I love the energy that they bring to the table and the creativity. I can't get enough of it. And I am very much looking forward to lockdown being over and having my kids back here.
Man,
Imagine, yeah.
if this wasn't Ottawa, I'd be like, take my kids half the time. It's cool. No, I love them, but you probably, have more fun with them. So take them half a day, bring them back in the evening. How are you sort of, dealing with COVID, and what were you doing before COVID happened from, helping kids and family? And then what are you doing now?
So before COVID, for the last 5 years, I had been working as a nature educator. Forest schools are something that have been popping up a bit everywhere over the last few years. And for those who aren't familiar with it, it's essentially a nature program. And so we are outdoors for 6 hours at a time, all year round. We had finally had a shelter built, which unfortunately the pandemic hit as we were about to be able to use it. But it's great. It's something that I feel very passionate about. I think kids really need that outdoors. And I live in downtown Ottawa, where, we didn't have a lot of parks in the area where I was, and our parks that were nearby often weren't safe. And so I signed up my son for this program after hearing such wonderful things about it. And I saw such a difference in him.
Wow.
We would be at the bus stop and he'd start pointing out birds and like just looking in the tiny patch of grass growing in the broken concrete and searching for bugs. And it's just opened up this whole new world. And so when I finished college, they were hiring and I had been there since. I believe that it's something that benefits so many kids, and especially the ones with special needs. And I'll get into that a little bit more later, but we would especially see kids where parents felt that they needed a day to connect with nature and be kids and play and run and explore, because school was just getting to be a bit too much at times.
Right.
So it's really nice to be able to give them that opportunity. And so, as you know, I have a learning pod this year. And so I had to make the decision of whether or not I would be returning to our nature programs in the fall. We had to make the decision in the summer, where the province was still leaning towards hybrid school.
Right.
So at the time, I'm thinking, well, if my kid's going to be home half the time, I can't work. You can't exactly work from home when you're in a forest.
Right.
So I made the choice to switch. I had seen this big trend in learning pods, and so many people have made the decision to homeschool this year, which you have definitely noticed. And so, yeah, I had looked into it and I found 3 wonderful families where we had similar expectations and ideas of, what education should look like. And, discussing with the parents and finding out what their kids' needs were and making sure that I could meet those. And it's been a wonderful experience. I really jumped in feet first, and it's been great.
No, that's amazing. And
That's awesome.
on the spectrum of like full-time homeschooling and after school program, we're sort of in the after school program mode where both kids are in virtual school. But the schools and the teachers are so burdened that they don't actually give them any homework or, real support other than sort of delivering the content. And so we've been using, our Schoolio products where the kids spend at least an hour every night working on the same units that are being taught in class, which, sort of works for our style of family where we're still part of the process, but can't take on the burden of doing that during the day. But Marie, let's talk about some of your experience, because you're also full-time homeschooling.
I am, yeah. So we were really strong and go-getters up until December, and then December hit. We kind of became slouches. We slowed down a lot, and now we kind of structure our day differently, where we get up, we go out for a jog every morning, and just start our day outside, and then we're really only doing a couple hours of school, and we're doing a lot more physical stuff because we needed to get off the couch and get outside more. But we use Schoolio full time, and the kids enjoy it. So that we're finding it very easy to follow, and it's been a lovely transition to have Schoolio as our resource and our schooling system. And it's a lot nicer to know that we're consistently homeschooling this year, rather than kind of always wondering, are they in school, out school? Like, I just like knowing that we're structured for the year. So it's been a nice option for our family.
Oh, that's amazing, man. So the big question to set the baseline up, to define what is kids with learning disability mean? What does kids with special learning needs mean? Like, what is the proper way to talk about it? And the reason I ask is, I didn't really know these things until my daughter was in grade 6. And, we thinking everything is fine. And, she's having a, sort of grade 4 experience in class. She's focuses when she's interested, and she doesn't when she's not, like a typical 5-year-old or grade 5er. And then we go to grade 6, and then I get called into this, school meeting with the principal there, the counselor, the HR person from TDSB, and like, somebody representing legal. And I'm sitting there going, what does she do in class? Why are we here? And they're like, look, we can't get your daughter to focus. We have 20 something kids in the class. We believe she's got ADHD. You need to test her and then give us a result. And then we recommend medication. And the first time I went home thinking, I didn't know I had a daughter with special needs. And then we went through the process of getting tested. And I remember I had to do the test and she had to do the test to find some connectivity. And the questions were like, do you get bored? Yes. I'm like, when things don't, are important to you, do you not want to do them? Yes. Do you have any stress when you're studying? Yes. And I'm like, okay, how is this, And so I'm still, conscious of that conversation. And I'm sure a lot of parents get that from schools. So I'd love for both of you to sort of help me define what is the terminology we're using and what does it mean?
So to answer the difference between a learning disability and special needs in terms of what qualifies, in terms of a learning disability, it's something where a disability can be diagnosed, right? So there is a psychological assessment, and what happens is there are very specific criteria that are being looked at. And so for ADHD, like you were saying, it's they want to check to what extent is focus an issue. Is it really about the focus, or is it, something underlying? Is this child not sleeping properly and then they're exhausted during the day? So they really want to get specific, and, they really have a sheet with the checklist, and they go through and they check it off. And when you look in the DSM, there's, for any mental illness, it's essentially a whole bunch of signs or symptoms, and they're going to say, okay, well, do they have at least 5 signs from this checklist? And so an issue with ADHD is that it is overly diagnosed. It's often improperly diagnosed. And what happens in those cases is that family doctors are able to prescribe medication without an assessment having been done. So they get a questionnaire that's one sheet, and they ask parents, okay, well, does your kid get bored? Do they have a hard time focusing? Well, do they get excited sometimes? And while a kid may very well have ADHD, they're not looking deeper into it. And so there can be all these other issues that are affecting it. And I'm going to say myself, I have ADHD. I was diagnosed at the age of 8. I've been on and off medication my whole life. And I think I was lucky to have an early diagnosis because I was able to learn strategies and ways to organize my brain, as I say, which really helped me, because now as an adult, I have all these great skills and tools, and working with kids with ADHD, where they often have certain behaviors where other people can find frustrating and lose patience. I look at them and I'm like, oh, I got you.
You can relate. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, oh, I see what's happening here. Take a walk with somebody. And so for an actual learning disability, there has to be a diagnosis. And with special needs, I would say that's a lot more vague, because any child can have special needs. That really means any situation where a child needs some type of extra support. And like you were saying, in our school boards, there's a class with over 20 kids. Oftentimes there's 30 students. Well, some kids are going to need to learn a bit differently, and it doesn't mean that there's a disability or a diagnosis. It just means that maybe these 30 kids aren't identical.
Right.
And so one of the big things that we're seeing on the rise is anxiety. And that's something that's becoming more common in kids, and that we have been seeing a lot more throughout the years. And when you have 30 students, the kids with anxiety are often the ones that it's an issue that can slip through the cracks. They have a tendency to be a bit more quiet. They're struggling a lot in school and academically, but instead of being disruptive in class, they're keeping quiet. They're too nervous to ask for help. And so it often goes unnoticed. So special needs really encompasses everything from learning disability to mental health issues, all the way to just a child who maybe isn't learning super well because the kid next to him is always, tapping his pencil on the desk and it's distracting. So I think we really need to change the way that we speak about special needs and see it as more what needs this child has, because every single child has a need. And some of those needs might be addressed perfectly well in your regular classroom.
Right.
And some might not.
And I think the common understanding is a special need would be dyslexia, autism, like those types of disabilities. When we hear special needs or learning disabilities, we automatically assume it's dyslexia or ADHD or autism. Like those are kind of to the extreme, but there are smaller needs like anxiety. Not that it's smaller, but it's different. It's not as noticeable. It's not as commonly diagnosed or visible to the average person, right?
Exactly.
So yeah,
and I guess a follow-up for me as a parent listening to both of you explain, which was great, is how do we as parents now that are out of crises or whatever it is deciding to homeschool, what symptoms can we start to look for? How do we start to pay attention? Because I've got 2 kids at home, and my daughter for the longest time would always have headphones on in their ears, and I'm thinking, well, are you studying or are you listening to music? But then after we really paid attention, we realized the background noise helps her focus. And funny enough, that's what I do. But then I'm not recognizing me in a 12-year-old. I'm going, you're distracted, you're on Spotify, turn it all off, do your homework, and it doesn't work, right? So now as parents who no longer have the luxury of just dropping the kids off at 8:45 and picking them up at 3:15 and don't have exposure to those symptoms or characteristics that maybe a teacher might catch or miss or whatever, is there things that we can share with our listening audience of things to look for in a one-on-one at home kitchen table kind of a setup?
Yeah, something that I would recommend is talk to your kid.
What? Get out of here. No way.
how do you do that?
That's another podcast.
But yeah, if your child is struggling, and this seems like such an obvious answer, and at the same time, I know that's not as easy as it may sound. But to really sit down and ask them, what are you having a hard time with? Do you like this? Is it interesting? Is it boring? Is that why you don't want to do it? Do you find this challenging to read? Are you having a hard time understanding the question? And it's not one big conversation. These are the little conversations that you have. Maybe it's a conversation that you save and you have over ice cream after dinner and just casually chat about it. Like, hey, I noticed you were getting really frustrated, talk to me about that. What was making you feel angry or sad or upset about that? Maybe we can try something different. And I think as a parent, that's one of the best things that you can do if you really do begin to notice some things that you don't know how to handle, right, or what to do. There's definitely places you can go and seek help and get professional advice. But one of the benefits of homeschooling is that, whether your child has learning disability with a diagnosis, or whether they're just struggling because maybe the environment is too distracting. When you're homeschooling, you're able to cater to what is best for your child. A teacher with 30 students can't do that. But having those little conversations day by day, like, hey, today, like, you did really well with this. How did you feel? Was anything different? Did anything help make it more interesting or help you understand more? And with my learning pod, we have these conversations every day. And it's really helped us go from feeling a little chaotic and trying to juggle the needs of 3 kids who all have different needs, to finding a really good balance.
Right.
And being able to anticipate, okay, well, I know that this child is going to be doing this assignment today and they're going to have a hard time with this. What can I do to help them? Can I plan to do this assignment when I know I have one-on-one time to offer? You really have that flexibility.
Yeah, I would say that's the beautiful thing about having them home. And that's something that I personally feel is so valuable to us parents. And we need to take that opportunity this year, because that is something that if you plan on sending your children back to school next fall, next year, whenever, if your kids are going back to school, you can take this opportunity to learn about what your child needs to have a successful learning environment, and potentially share that with their future teachers. Say, this child really needs a quiet environment, or this child needs to listen to the headphones. Can you offer that opportunity for my daughter? Because that's what will get better results out of her. And if we, can share that with the teachers who wouldn't have the time to notice all of those things out of these children, then maybe they will be able to, make their environment better for them when they are back in school. Or if they stay home, then you're learning how to make it better for them, and you can cater whatever your children need. And I think that's exciting for me at this time, to be able to say, hey, you and I are going to do this later, just one-on-one, and it's going to be a better, successful situation, rather than a stressed out, crying, throwing crayons at me kind of situation, we're going to have a nicer moment. We're going to get the work done, and we're going to move on to other things, and it won't be a battle of tears every day. So that's just, you don't always have to sit down and have conversations. You can be observing, you can say, I'm just going to sit back and watch. What are their struggles every day? Wow, my son hates writing his letters. It's just torture to him. So he has to do it. It's part of life, but how can I make it a little better for him? That's what I have to learn. Yeah. So that's a really exciting part of being able to have them home this year. So
the 2 things you guys said that really resonated with me, and the more and more as we build this little startup Schoolio, I'm paying attention to all the things that we didn't pay attention to. For example, we've never had a parent-teacher call where the teacher said, tell me about your daughter or son. Yeah. What is he or she like at home? It's always been, here's a report card, here's what happens in class, rah, and then here's areas they need to support them and go. But I've never had a conversation with a teacher where they stop and go, tell us what your kid is like at home. What do they like to do? What's fun time for them? What makes them sad? How can I learn about the child that I can put into the classroom? And one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is when internet and technology became abundant, the world became smaller. And as much as good news we also saw an abundance in bad news, and it felt like the world is burning at some point. But we realized it's always been like that. We just have a better window to see it now. So this impact of technology on this digital baby economy, where they grow up, and my son at age 3 was on the iPhone tapping games and stuff. When we talk about learning disabilities and maybe learning advantages by being sort of, access to digital and how your brain thinks, is there a consideration when we look at the kids of things that used to be, learning disabilities, are actually no longer something that hinders them? If ADHD allows you to do 3 or 4 things at the same time and multitask. We celebrate that in entrepreneurs when you're 18 or 20, right? And so when we're looking at our kids in that kindergarten to grade 5 or grade 6, in your opinions, how much of these learning disabilities that always have been painted negative can also be a positive trait that we sort of invest in and go on?
I think all of them could be, it's always about seeing the brighter side of things. And like you said, ADHD, you can, be extremely successful with ADHD. It's nothing should be looked at as a hindrance. And I understand why it is in the school system, but it's because they have to manage 30 kids in a classroom. And so it is going to slow them down. It is going to be a distraction for the class. Obviously autism, there's all different levels of the spectrum. If you have a child who is just struggling very minor versus can't even speak, those are very different needs in a classroom setting. So they have their work cut out for them when they're in the classroom. And so yes, some are going to be viewed as a hindrance, but that is the beauty of having them home. You can celebrate them and they never have to be made to feel that they are an inconvenience or a problem. They are amazing, unique human beings. And I think that's really cool. If I had a child who was really struggling, I would really celebrate the opportunity to homeschool them and make them feel like they are just, the successful human being, no matter what their struggles are.
Yeah,
But
I love that. I love that, Marie.
Yeah, but I feel for the teachers. I don't know what the solution is in a classroom setting, but we are homeschooling, so I think as a homeschooling parent, if you're struggling with a child who has special needs, you don't ever make them feel like a hindrance. If you are choosing to homeschool them, you make them feel like they're have the most potential, and they will show you their potential.
Yeah, no, well said. Well said. Alycia, how does that impact sort of when you're working with kids? How are you consciously baking in, confidence building, empowering things in addition to curriculum? And what does some of that look like? Like what activities or tips and tricks that you have in your bag of arsenal that empowers the child?
Well, and just to touch on this, like I had mentioned, I was diagnosed with ADHD at a very young age, and going through the school system, I certainly felt, I had that label on me, and I had some teachers that, wouldn't try, didn't have the patience. I got sent out in the hall, and I had other teachers that really worked with me and just found great ways to motivate me, and I wouldn't trade it. I think I have a lot of my personality, a lot of my favorite traits about myself come from that. And so when I work with kids, I'm not shy about talking about it. I'll mention that I have ADHD, and I'll be like, oh yeah, my brain is just wired differently. I just need to learn a different way. That's okay. I figured out how I learn best, and now I'm doing great. And so I kind of use that with the kids. I say, oh, your brain is just everyone's got wires in their brains. Some people have their wiring set up a bit differently, and we just need to find the best way for you to learn. And my son has we suspect dyslexia. He hasn't been diagnosed yet, but we really like that analogy for him. He's 11, and he said that in class, where he didn't understand something, and he told the teacher in front of everyone, who's like, my brain is just wired a bit differently. I think I just need it explained a different way.
Wow, what a moment.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And so in terms of ways to learn, in class, when you do have 30 kids, you can't be doing experiments all the time. You can't be going on field trips every day. Worksheets are what makes the most sense in that setting. It's easiest, it can be organized, it can be graded. And I will say I've seen great initiatives and wonderful activities done in class, but teachers are limited in terms of that. I think they're stretched thin, and they're doing incredible things with the resources that they have. But when you're homeschooling, you have endless doors that you can open. And so in my pod, I have a child with ADHD. I have 2 children who are advanced. And I have a child who has severe anxiety. And so none of them are in regular school this year due to their special needs and the extra impacts of COVID. So we've got a mix. And so we found wonderful ways. One of the children I had noticed, he was doing fantastic in math. He does great with numbers, but we're doing addition and subtraction with 4-digit numbers. And he was getting 18 out of 20 wrong. And so I have these big rolls of brown wrapping paper that you can get at the dollar store. And we have that covering an 8-foot long table. And so I started writing down all of these math problems in bigger numbers. And he got every single one of them right.
Wow.
Whereas before he got 18 out of 20 wrong, he wasn't having a hard time doing the calculations. It was just written so small. And, at that age, in grade 4, he's still writing big letters and big numbers. And so you've got this teeny tiny 0.9 font on a worksheet, and then he's writing in like the equivalent of a size 24. And so he can't keep track of, where his numbers need to go. And so it was just something that simple of, we just need to write this bigger. And, this was a child who was feeling so defeated and feeling like all of a sudden he's bad at the best subject, that he's always done good at. And, so it's just so validating for him to see like, no, like you're doing great. You absolutely know how to do this. It's just these numbers were really small.
Yeah.
And so it's just finding simple things like that. So now with him, whenever he's kind of struggling, we take out the big roll of paper and some markers and just write it in big numbers and letters, and
it's so awesome.
He zips right through it. Other things that we do is, this is always COVID dependent, but we take a lot of field trips. And so we go to the library every Monday, which is great because it's a nice long walk. And there's a big park nearby. And so the kids go in, they bring their library cards. They have to find 3 books that are related to subjects that we are learning about that week. And then they can get extra books for interest for their free time while they're here. And it's really great because they're learning life skills. So now they know to keep their library card with them. They know how to check out the books. They have learned how to go find those books in the library, which I, as an adult, I had to ask the librarian. I'm like, I don't understand what all these letters and numbers on the ends
Me too. I'm like, can I search somewhere?
Yeah, so it's been really great, and we're incorporating like life skills as well. We do cooking on Fridays, and so I had a recipe for cupcakes. And so what I did was we were practicing. I had a student doing measurements and another student doing fractions unit. And so I took all of the measurements and I created math problems with it. So. And so it's like, oh, well, half of this many milliliters of, this ingredient. And so they had to decode it and work together to figure out the right measurements. And as soon as that was done, it's like, okay, go make some cupcakes. And
that's fun.
And they also knew, if we don't do this properly, our cupcakes are going to taste pretty bad.
And you got to eat it no matter what. No.
Yeah, we don't want salty cupcakes, boy.
No.
No, and I think I love the fact that, like, we're hopefully parents listening to this realize, you have all of the resources to be super creative and find ways that make sense for your child. And there's no playbook to follow. The school's not going to save you by giving you a booklet on what to do. you get to choose how to do it, which I think positioned as an empowering statement uh, is the reality versus, you're kind of left alone to do stuff. And I know a lot of parents reach out to you, Marie, from our community to ask for ideas and suggestions. So there's a
Yeah.
resource like us that you can tap into. This is not a product plug, even if you don't buy Schoolio, but you can benefit from the resources we have. Just reach out.
Yeah, and I think a lot of parents at the beginning are intimidated by the idea of teaching multiple children. And I can't imagine having special needs on top of teaching multiple children. So Alycia, would you be able to give our parents some tips on homeschooling multiple children with special needs and balancing those needs?
Absolutely. And Marie, I think that you'll agree that when homeschooling, it doesn't require as many hours in the day to teach, especially when we consider, kids are at school for 6 hours. How much of that time is allotted to recess and snack and just waiting on the teacher to share the assignment? And so with homeschooling, you don't typically need as much time, which means, again, you get all that flexibility. So if you have a child with special needs, establish what those needs are. What subjects do they really need help with? And try and plan your day so that you have chunks of time where you can offer one-on-one support. Can you combine what the kids are learning for different grades? Absolutely. And I have grade 4s and 6, and they often do the same work. They just have different standards, or, my grade 6 is working with bigger numbers in math. And so that does allow you to really be there as a support. It's not like in a class of 30 where your kid is raising their hand and they're waiting for, the teacher to make the rounds, so the other 4 kids first. So establish what the needs are and see what helps, what works. I think something, we were talking about how parents are so intimidated when they enter homeschooling. It's trial and error. And I think that can't be said enough. So many parents, they try something and it doesn't immediately work and they think, oh, I'm not cut out for this. No one knows your child better than you. Even if you don't have a background in disabilities or in education, you know your child better than any teacher, any counselor, any other person that has worked with them.
Absolutely.
And so parents need to cut themselves some slack and realize that it takes a while to learn, and you can learn with your kid. And if, some outdoor resources are necessary, there's nothing saying that you can't homeschool and also ask a tutor to do some work with your kid if you feel like you aren't able to address a specific need. That's perfectly fine. And so what I do is I find that really adding in a lot of hands-on things, if we're learning about biology or animal adaptations, we take a walk and we turn those things into conversation. If a student is really struggling with reading and writing, I read the text out loud, we turn it into a conversation. They can give me their answers orally. Because I am teaching other kids, I do keep detailed records of all of the work that we do. And so I'll write at the top of the sheet, answer orally, and I'll write down the answers so that when parents do want to check in, I do have a binder and it does show all of the work that we've done, but it also shows how it was done. It's been really helpful for them to see, like, wow, like my kid really excelled in the subject, because minor changes were made.
That's great.
Nice.
That's amazing.
Helpful.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. I like to remind our customers too that when they always say, oh, but I'm not a teacher, I don't really know what I'm doing. I like to remind them that we actually are all teachers and that we have been teaching our children their entire life. And this is just different content that we are teaching them now. We've learned them to tie their shoes, or taught them, sorry, we've taught them how to tie their shoes, taught them how to put socks on. We've been teaching them their entire life. Now we're just teaching them different subjects, and that's all this is. And we do know how to work with them. And when I put it in that way, parents are like, oh yeah, I guess I do know some things. But it just seems so intimidating at first. And it's the same thing. I hope if I was juggling multiple children, I have 3 at home. If I was struggling with one who had special needs, I would probably isolate some lessons and do that one-on-one with that child while the others are on their iPads or playing a game somewhere else in the house, and have that direct one-on-one time. And I know that a lot of our parents are struggling right now with balancing work and making all the meals and teaching. And so they have a lot on their plates. But if you just carve out 20 minutes alone time, then you'll probably get a lot better results than struggling with all the children present and trying to multitask. If you can give that focus, you'll probably get a bit, a better one-on-one and better quality learning during that time, right? So that's one suggestion I would make for our parents. We have another question from another parent, and I think this seems to be a bit of a trend. And so this parent asked, I would love to know if homeschooling children with learning disabilities is becoming the norm, or is it poor lack or support in the schools and high cost of specialized private schools that is directing families to do more homeschooling? Do you have anything you can offer on that, Alycia?
So as you said, it's definitely a trend. And I think that's something that the pandemic has done for a lot of families, is show them just how behind their kids were in so many of the homeschooling Facebook groups or the COVID virtual learning support Facebook groups that have started to boom. I've been seeing so many parents comment saying, I had no idea that my child was struggling so much. And Satish, you had said it well, where, all of a sudden you're sitting in a room with the principal and the counselor and the lawyer, or not the lawyer, but, it's just all of these people. And you hadn't even been told that there were issues, if I understood that properly.
No, 100%. Yeah. It was a complete, blindside for us, because we now are in the middle of a problem that we don't understand. We don't understand when it started. We don't understand why it's there. We don't understand if it's solvable. But there's this immediate pressure to go, hey, we found this thing. You got to deal with it. Mm-hmm. And you figure it out, because we can't help you. And I'm like, wait a second. I need a bit more, because the answer can't be medication. And if that is the right answer, how do we get that decision made? Not because a bunch of people told me in a boardroom, this is what you got to do.
Yeah, I agree more. And so many parents are now experiencing that, where all of a sudden they're like, well, why didn't anyone tell me? And so we've been seeing a lot of parents who have been, an extra support for their child, some who have abandoned regular school completely. And all of a sudden, I'm seeing parents who just have this boost of confidence of, I was feeling so defeated and worried for my child. And now that I'm teaching them and homeschooling, their child is doing so much better. And we've discussed so many of the factors that affect that. But so I think that the pandemic really provided an opportunity for parents to see that, because otherwise, like you had mentioned before, you drop your kid off in the morning, you pick them up in the afternoon, they barely get homework. So there just aren't many opportunities to really see that for, a full-time working parent. And so I think that we're going to continue seeing a lot more students homeschool.
I agree.
And as for the comment with the school supports, my son has been in 2 different school boards. And based on my experience, I believe that it really does depend on the school. We had one school where they were denying that there were any struggles until they told me, this isn't working, he should leave. And so I went from, no, it's fine, he's just, a little slow to read. No, it's okay. No, we don't need an IEP. And then all of a sudden I have the principal telling me, you know, I never say this, but I think you should change schools. Which, you know, it's, he was in French. And so she told me, no, it's a language barrier.
The infamous but, you know, we never do this, but.
But
we did change him schools. And I was absolutely blown away by the support that was offered when he changed schools. It really changed my view of how things can run. You know, he didn't have a diagnosis, but immediately they put in an IEP. They set him up in reading groups. I had great communication with the teacher, and he did absolutely phenomenal that year. He went from not being able to read a sentence to reading full paragraphs.
Amazing.
It's just because finally someone gave him the help that he needed, right? So in terms of school, I think it really varies, and I think parents can do quite a bit of research, but it's not very straightforward, unfortunately.
No, every situation is going to be unique, and depends on the school and what support and teacher. Everybody's different, right? So absolutely.
I'm gonna cap that with, like, maybe it's my personal experience that led to this kind of a thinking, and by no means this is a call for a revolution or anything, but I feel like until the thing with my daughter happened, whatever the school said was the holy grail. Like, I would have never imagined pushing back. And I think that was probably the first time I was reminded that, you know, it's a partnership, and we have as parents to push back on the system and not take everything they say as the holy truth. And I think a lot of parents, you know, if you feel like you can't say anything back to the teacher, or, you know, call up the principal and have a discussion. I did all of it. It felt weird in the beginning to push back to a system. But I think we need to know that we can do that, and we can push back as tax-paying parents who care. Because, like both of you said, nobody will know my child as well as I do.
Yeah, and you have to advocate for your child, and you have to go with your gut, and they aren't always right. You know, people make mistakes, and you don't want a mistake made with your child.
Agreed. And I will add, for any parents who are struggling right now within the school system, there are advocates that can be hired who will come and sit in on meetings with the principal and with the teachers who know your child's rights, who know how the school systems work, and who can help educate you on what you can ask for. So if that is something that someone is struggling with, there are options out there for those who are feeling intimidated.
That's amazing.
Good to know. Yeah. Good to know.
Do we have one more question, Marie?
Yeah, we do. So we're wondering if there's actually any research that's been done for children with learning disabilities, and what the benefits are from being removed from the school system and being homeschooled, and having those extra supports. Is the success rate higher? Have we actually done any research, or has there been anything done? Do we have any facts?
In terms of facts, I can't really say. I think it's something that's not subjective, but as we've been saying, so individual to each unique situation. That I think if there are studies done, it might not speak to your situation. Right. I mean, it depends a lot on what the diagnosis is, what the school is willing to do, what resources they have to offer, as well as the parent. How comfortable do they feel to address this? Are they able to get outside support if needed? I think it's something that's so unique to each individual child, and family, I should say.
Yeah. What overall benefits do you see for parents who choose to homeschool a child with special needs?
The benefits that I see are that the child's needs are addressed and prioritized. Within the school system, with such large classrooms, teachers are overwhelmed, understandably. And typically, if a child isn't being disruptive, they often fall through the cracks. And not to say that the issues won't get addressed, but if a child is being disruptive and loud and preventing the teacher from giving a lesson, that gets addressed immediately. If a child is being quiet and not asking for help and not bothering anyone, they tend to get left alone. I fell in that category as a child myself.
Right.
And so I would go through a full week where I wouldn't write a single thing down. And then on Fridays, when we had to hand in work, I got in big trouble.
Oh, no.
And so, you know, like we've been saying this whole time, parents who choose to homeschool, one, you know, that shows that the parent is, one, able to do that, right? Like you said, any parent can homeschool. They're teachers. They've taught their children their whole lives. If they are homeschooling, it means that they have the means to actually take that opportunity and want what's best for their child. And they're able to address all of those needs that might not be able to be met within the school board. Right. And so when it comes to certain disabilities, you know, my son, his school board, last year, he was in reading programs. He had one-on-one time with an educator. They were able to offer all of these great things that I would not have been able to provide at the time. And so I think that overall, if a parent is able to homeschool and is able to get those resources, I think that the outcome greatly outweighs the rest.
No, that's amazing. That's a great way to close off the session. Thank you, Alycia, for your time. Lots of value bombs in today's session. I'm sure parents listening to it, you know, if they want to reach out to you and get some support, is it okay if they reach out and say hi to you?
Absolutely.
Amazing, amazing. And Marie, thank you for co-piloting with me and sharing some of your stories, which is great to create some relevancy. And I think to sort of close it off, if I can talk to three groups of people, if you're a parent and you've got a child with special needs at home, look at it as a way to empower them and not as something that you want to hide or shy from. And if you can change your perspective of what your child needs, then you can very easily open up and talk about it. And when you open up and talk about it, the world will come and help. There's Facebook groups, there's people like Alycia, there's folks like me, Marie, that can jump in and help, but you got to come out and let us know that you are, you know, trying to be in this space. And so don't play shy. Don't look at your child's needs as a pain point, but to what everybody has said today, as a way to empower them and build them up. And then the world will help. If your teacher is listening to this, ask the parent what the child is like. Get some insight into what's happening when they get home and what they're doing when they're not in class, and build that into your, you know, day-to-day planning. And that will really change the student, parent, and teacher dynamic, in my opinion. And finally, you know, anybody that's a tutor that's working with special needs kids, pay attention to the signs. It's not about just delivering the academic curriculum, but also understanding what to look for that the child is not saying or doing in addition to what they're doing. And so we hope all three categories of folks that are listening to today's conversation can take a little bit away from what we're doing. And we'll be back shortly with another exciting topic. In the meantime, comment below with any questions that we can follow up on. And if you enjoy anything about today's conversation, leave a review and a little bit of hearts and love. This is Satish from Schoolio. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.